The scene of the kiss between Cal Kestis and Merrin is one of the most powerful in Star Wars Jedi. Survivor. Not because it's romantic, but because it represents a rupture, a liberation, an emotional truth that goes far beyond the codes of the Jedi or the lore of Star Wars. It's important to understand the context. Cal is a Jedi. Merrin is a Night Sister. Two individuals raised in radically different orders, both of which reject romantic attachments in the name of a greater cause. For the Jedi, love is a distraction. For the Night Sisters, it's a vulnerability. And yet, this kiss happens in the middle of chaos, in a galaxy under tyranny, in the heart of trauma. This moment symbolizes the evolution of both characters. Cal is no longer the frightened Padawan we met in Fallen Order. He's grown, hardened by survival, but also opened to emotion. Merrin, on her side, has learned to trust again, to believe in something other than vengeance. Their kiss is not a distraction from the narrative. It is the narrative. It's the proof that in the middle of war, it's possible to choose tenderness. That rebellion can also mean allowing oneself to love, and that Star Wars is not just about lightsabers and the Force. It's also about emotional resistance, the right to feel, to bond, to protect not only through combat, but through connection. This is why this scene will open this video, because it reminds us that Star Wars, when at its best, is a story of humanity in a galaxy of violence. And because, personally, it's this moment that reconnected me with everything I love about this universe. Ezra Bridger's sacrifice at the end of Star Wars Rebels still gives me chills. He's young, full of life, full of questions. And yet, when the moment comes to choose, he doesn't hesitate. He disappears with Thrawn without knowing if he'll survive, without knowing if he'll come back. It's a heroic moment, but not the usual kind. It's not a duel to the death, not a glorious explosion, it's a departure. A silent act of resistance. A proof that sacrifice in Star Wars doesn't always rhyme with death, but with disappearance. Ezra chooses to erase himself to protect his friends, not because he wants to be a martyr, but because it's the only way. Years go by. The war continues. The Empire falls. But Ezra doesn't come back. His absence becomes a wound, a ghost that haunts the crew of the Ghost, especially Sabine. Because Ezra didn't just disappear, he left behind emotions, a bond, a love never expressed. And then, in the Ahsoka series, he returns. And that return is almost unreal. Ezra is no longer a child, he's a man, a survivor. We feel the weight of exile on his face in his silences, but also this unbreakable spark of hope that has always defined him. His return is not a triumph, it's a reunion. A fragile, moving moment. A reminder that Star Wars is also about those who get lost and come back. That the Force is not just a power, it's a path, a destiny, a link that never breaks. The return of Luke Skywalker at the end of Season 2 of The Mandalorian is, for me, one of the most beautiful scenes ever made in the Star Wars universe. Not because of special effects, not because of nostalgia, but because of silence. The silence when the elevator opens, the silence when the green lightsaber ignites, the silence on Moff Gideon's ship, the silence in Din Djarin's eyes, the silence when Grogu touches the screen, and the silence when Luke finally enters the room. No music, no grand speech, no close-up on his face. Just a presence, a silhouette, a calm. This isn't the Luke who just defeated the Emperor. It's not the Luke of the sequels either. It's a Luke in transition, a Luke who no longer needs to prove anything. This Luke doesn't come to save the galaxy. He comes to save one child, Grogu, and that's enough. Because in that moment, Luke represents what the Jedi were supposed to be. Not soldiers, not generals, not legends, but protectors, guides, beacons in the night. His return isn't just a fan service moment, it's an emotional pivot point, the end of a bond between Din and Grogu, the beginning of a new path, a spiritual passage. It's a lesson, a legacy, a light. A reminder that Star Wars in its finest moments speaks softly, and when it does, it touches the heart more than any explosion ever could. What if, in a galaxy as vast as Star Wars, a story brought together Luke Skywalker, Ezra Bridger, and Cal Kestis? Not just a crossover, not just fan service, but a narrative built on a deep idea. That three men, scarred by the collapse of the Jedi Order, each chose a different path, but could still meet. Could? Imagine this scene: a distant planet, a temple half buried in sand and silence, and three presences. Luke dressed in his black Jedi robe, but carrying a calm, softened gaze. Ezra, his hair longer, his experience etched in every word. Cal, marked by scars, but serene. No one speaks at first. They look at each other, they sense each other, and they understand. They've all lost everything. They've all rejected at one point what the Jedi once represented. And yet, here they are still Jedi. Not because of an order, but because of what they've chosen to be. Luke brings legacy, Ezra brings sacrifice, Cal brings resistance. Together they could form something new. Not a new council, not a new academy, but a new philosophy. A vision of the Force no longer frozen in dogma, but open to emotion, doubt, and choice. This what if is not just a dream. It's the mirror of everything that makes Star Wars fascinating. Because it reminds us that this universe is not made of absolutes, but of nuance. That light and dark aren't binary. That redemption is possible. That grief does not end the story, it shapes the hero who continues to walk. And maybe someday Star Wars will tell this story. Not one of war, but of healing, of rebuilding, of reconciliation. Maybe that's why I still love Star Wars. Not just for the battles, not just for the lightsabers, but for what happens in between. For that kiss between Cal and Merrin, two souls who had every reason not to love each other. Two destinies who chose emotion over dogma. For Ezra's sacrifice. This departure with no promise of return, this boy who vanished into the stars to save a planet, and who came back a man, full of silence and resilience. For Luke's return, that silhouette in the corridor, that green lightsaber, that moment when a legend doesn't shout but simply appears, and shows that being a Jedi means protecting, not commanding. And finally, for everything Star Wars allows us to imagine, that maybe in a forgotten corner of the galaxy, three Jedi Luke, Ezra, and Cal might one day sit down, and instead of fighting, they talk, they share, they forgive. And finally, for everything Star Wars allows us to imagine, that maybe in a forgotten corner of the galaxy, three Jedi Luke, Ezra, and Cal might one day sit down, and instead of fighting, they talk, they share, they forgive. Star Wars is not just fiction. It's a mirror of our fears, our hopes, our wounds. A galaxy far, far away that tells us something very close. As long as Star Wars continues to explore these stories of return, of sacrifice, of attachment, then yes, I'll always keep watching the stars.